What is up, fight fans? We are live. I know I'm ripping Bruce off on that. I got to be careful because I don't know if he has that one trademarked, but I can't say the other thing he says because I'll get in big trouble for that one. It's Jim Greasover, Jeff Kane, MMA Weekly's UFC post-fight roundup, I think we're calling it. We're rounding everything up. We're going through everything that we saw yesterday on the UFC Fight Night card on ABC TV. The all-time epic performance from Max Blessed Holloway. The Blessed Express ran all over Calvin Kattar yesterday. And, man, I'll tell you what, the Boston finisher did not get finished. I give him all the credit in the world because, as we're about to tell you in a minute, the numbers are absolutely staggering with regard to this fight. If you have not watched it, go back and watch it on ESPN+. An all-time epic masterpiece of a performance by one Max Blessed Holloway to finish off a card that was great. The co-main event, little vintage Carlos Condit with a win over Matt Brown. Always nice to see the natural-born killer doing his thing in there. And then a whole bunch of great fights before that, including 3 knockouts in a row. Big-time finishes in the earlier fights on the main card from UFC's Fight Island. As you see there, the aerial view. I wonder which one of those yachts is Dana's. Jeff, great fight card yesterday. You are about as tired as Max Holloway. I mean, his volume and his output only matched by yours on the keyboard. He was throwing punches and elbows and kicks and knees. Yours was keyboard related, man. I don't know how you don't have carpal tunnel after yesterday and all the stories you wrote on MMAWeekly.com.
Yeah, man, typical fight night, man. That's what we're here for. Yeah, Max put in a ridiculous performance. The output, and like we'll reveal the numbers in a minute, but man, they were staggering. I didn't realize it. I knew his output was high during the fight, but you aren't registering just how many punches that he's throwing. And actually, according to him in the post-fight press conference, he wasn't registering how many punches he was throwing either.
No doubt. And right now we're taking a visual tour of Fight Island. It looks like beautiful place in Abu Dhabi and an incredible event yesterday. You see Etihad Arena there and the UFC putting on an incredible event. And I know we have some footage of Max Holloway that we'll be throwing up there in a minute as we talk about this fight, Jeff. But literally Max Holloway is right back in title contention. And I don't see, like you said, anybody else in the division who deserves a title shot more. Brian Ortega is going to get it after all that time on the shelf and one win over the Korean Zombie. And ironically, the last time Max Holloway put a beating on a fighter like he did Calvin Kattar yesterday, it was Brian Ortega. As Max shattered his own records, let's take a look at some of the numbers here, Jeff, and you and I can go through this. But the most lopsided scorecards in a unanimous decision in a 5-round fight in UFC history, kind of tying Rich Franklin's fight back at UFC 58 in 2006, a 50-42 card and 2 50-43. So one judge had 2 10-8 rounds for Max. Two judges had 2 10-8 rounds for Max. One judge had 3 10-8 rounds for Max. Now, let's just going to go through this. Max Holloway, I mean, just the punches, the elbows, the knees, the body shots alone, just an unbelievable, just for Calvin Kattar to survive. But we're talking about broken records here, okay? According to the UFC statistics, and we'll get some video of this fight up there in just a minute, Holloway landed a UFC record 445 significant strikes, shattered his previous record of, it says 290 in what I'm reading. You said you saw 302, but that's his record against Brian Ortega at UFC 231, along with the Kattar landed 133 significant strikes. And I think we're getting to the fight here eventually, but 578 combined significant strikes and differentials 312. So 141 significant strikes in round 4 alone. Round 4 alone. And stagger output from Max Holloway.
Yeah, it was crazy to see him have that high volume. And during the post-fight press conference, Max thought he was throwing like 20 to 25 punches a round. He's throwing upwards of nearing 150. It's just, but you're in the zone, so to speak, when you think that, right? You throw at 140 something punches, but in your mind you threw 20. I would love to be in that good a shape.
Is that like, did you feel like you only wrote 4 articles instead of 400 yesterday? Same thing or no?
Yeah, no, it's not the same thing. Look at him. I mean, it's just, it's incredible that he has that output. I mean, nobody has that output. I don't care who you are. No one. And clearly he set his own record and then beat his own record. Max Holloway's a legend, man. It's
Love him.
we're lucky to see it, right? We're lucky to be here and be able to watch Max do his thing in the octagon.
Yeah, he was unbelievable. I mean, just head strikes landed 274 significant head strikes, 117 significant body strikes, 141 significant strikes in round 4, 447 total strikes landed, 746 strikes attempted. He threw 746 strikes in 25 minutes. Think about that for
It's
one
crazy.
second, people in the
Yeah.
chat room. Think about this for 1 second. 746 strikes in 25 minutes.
Oh, and that's somebody dodging him and stuff and going away. Just get in front of a heavy bag and try it yourself with no movement or anything. Just throw 700 punches at the heavy bag and tell me if you make it to the 700.
Unbelievable, man. Yeah, and I mean, look, I do a 60-minute round on the heavy bag, and I'm falling down. I mean, this is just unbelievable, and the way that he mixes it up, Jeff, too. This isn't just stand, jab, throw, jab, throw. There's all kinds of hooks and uppercuts and body shots, and he's mixing in kicks and knees and elbows. He's dancing. He's avoiding. Pulled his Anderson Silva out and put his hands down and just kind of did the robot dance to avoid some punches. He's pointing at the commentators and at Dana, saying he's the best boxer in the UFC, and he put on a show. I mean, on ABC TV, on Broadcast Network TV for the first time in 3 years, the UFC kicking off 2021 from Fight Island after just a crazy year in 2020, a great year in 2020. What a way to kick it off. What a superstar to headline that event. We have Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier coming up, and we know Conor's reach and Conor's star power, but you will never, I don't want to say never, but very rarely see anyone shine like that on a stage like that the way Max Holloway did yesterday. It's right up there with, it's got to be the best performance of his career. The Ortega fight was incredible too, but it's up there. And you've been doing this for a long time, man, almost 20 years with MMA Weekly. We were there. You were, I mean, MMA Weekly being we, not me, before Dana and the Fertitas even bought it. Have you ever seen any fighter put on a show in a clinic like Max Holloway did yesterday on Fight Island?
I mean, you mentioned it earlier. You'd have to go back to Max against Brian Ortega, right? He put on a clinic that fight, but not near the output that he had in this one. Yeah, I think that was Max's best performance. You're seeing Max come into his own, maybe losing the title, reinvigorated him or whatever. Not that he fell off in those fights. I mean, let's not act like he fell off in those fights. Those were incredible fights, and he could have won the second one for sure. Not the first though. Yeah, it's hard to think go back to have somebody dominate. Well, what happens is you can't withstand that amount of damage over 5 rounds. And so most people are done in the second or third round. And so you just don't get to see that because it doesn't happen. No one can absorb all that. And that's a testament to the toughness of Calvin.
Yeah, I mean, the spinning. Look at him. We don't even have to talk. Just watch. Look at what he's doing. If you're in the chat, just, throw it up in the chat. Let us know what you're thinking out there. Do you think you've seen anything better, any better performance in the octagon than what, Max did? And this is from a striking standpoint. We've seen John Jones dominate, choke Machida out up against the fence. We've seen huge performances in big-time fights where fighters were dominant. Kane dominated him the second 2 fights, but in terms of just striking, you're on ABC. This is the network that Muhammad Ali made famous with boxing, with Howard Cosell for all those years. ABC was the network for boxing. It hasn't been in a while, but it was for a long time. So much history, and Max was aware of that and pointing it out to Dana and to the announcers, DC and Hardy and John Anik. Hey, I'm the best boxer in the UFC. Very hard to argue that point with Max Holloway. Just an unbelievable, epic performance. We've seen him trade back and forth with Poirier at 55 for that interim title and take a ton of punishment from Poirier, from Volko. We've seen him fight Conor to the end. Didn't get finished by him either. He's just one of the toughest dudes you've ever seen. And he did absorb quite a few strikes yesterday, too, from Calvin Kattar. And speaking of toughness, man, I mean, Calvin Kattar, to absorb that many strikes and keep coming. He looked out on his feet a couple times, especially in the 4th round, Jeff. But for him to absorb that amount of punishment and never really look hurt and just keep coming and keep throwing himself, that in and of itself was mind-boggling on top of Max's performance.
Yeah, it was crazy that somebody could withstand that amount. Max does such a really good job. He doubles up that jab and gets you moving back, which opens up that third strike. Right, he either goes to the body or throws a hook, depending, or a straight right. It kind of just depends on how he's feeling at the moment or what's open. Max, that was a clinic, and I don't see anybody in the UFC that's a better boxer. I mean, maybe the chat, maybe people will help me out. I don't see anybody that's a better boxer than Max Holloway in there. Maybe comparable, but not better.
Well, Dustin Poirier outboxed Max. Standing Warrior says that in the chat. Thank you, Warrior, for that. And that was a
At
case where
155.
at 155 he outstruck him, but he did say best in the UFC. So maybe he fights Poirier again one day, but he's gone toe to toe. Look, you have Conor McGregor, who the WBC says is one boxing win away from a boxing title fight. Hard to say anybody's a better boxer than McGregor, who also beat Max back in the day. But we'll see two great boxers again on Saturday night in Conor and Poirier. If you like striking, you're going to love that fight card too. And with Hooker and Chandler going at it in the co-main. But in terms of pure striking in the octagon, and you know what my friend called me? He's a hardcore boxing guy. And for those of you who don't know my background, I used to broadcast and do play-by-play on national TV for Roy Jones Jr. Boxing, and we had some really good up-and-coming fighters and got to do some stuff with Roy and things like that and see some high-level boxing. I've always been a big boxing fan from way back in the day. My friend, and I'll let his words say this, not mine, because I'm biased toward MMA. I'm already hook, line, and sinker into mixed martial arts, but he hit me up, and he does not watch the UFC. He watched yesterday, and he said, I got one question for you. And I said, what? He goes, why the hell would anybody ever watch boxing again when you can watch this? And that's what Max Holloway did for all of us yesterday on ABC TV in front of the world from Fight Island.
Yeah, it was a big event, and they needed somebody to perform. Right, it's the first one at that state. It's a new stadium. It's the first event on ABC. It's aired where everybody can see it in the U.S. anyway. And they needed a performance like that. Max delivered. I mean, Max completely. He always delivers, though. He always delivers. And I'll go back to the Poirier fight. That's a short notice fight up a division. And people can talk about Conor, except we saw Conor in a boxing match get absolutely destroyed like he was an amateur against a high-level boxer. Max's output shows that he's not going to gas in that 8th round. You know what I mean? I mean, Max, he just threw 700 and some odd strikes in an MMA fight. So I actually think that Max in a boxing environment could probably thrive because he's not going to gas. That was Conor's undoing. I mean, anybody that watched that Conor Floyd fight that thought that Conor was in it, I don't know what they were watching. He was never in it. You had Floyd toying with the guy until he punched himself out, and then he just absolutely. It was like a veteran boxing gym, and some young kid come in there, and you teach him a lesson. You say, "Go ahead, punch yourself out, and then I'm going to beat you." That's what happened to McGregor. I don't see that happening to Max Holloway in any sport.
No, he's unbelievable, man. His cardio is off the charts. And for Volko to dominate him like he did in fight 1 was really impressive. And fight 2, the way Volkanovski came back after Max blitzed him in the first 2 rounds, that fight was a lot closer than I originally thought it was. And I thought Max had won. And Roberto Lopez in the chat says, hey, let's be clear. Kattar is not an elite level boxer. True.
No,
but Max Holloway, and he's not chopped liver either, but Max Holloway is. And Roberto followed it up, Jeff, with every MMA fighter thinks they're a great boxer, even Ben Askren. I don't think Ben said that. He said he would fight Jake Paul. Everybody wants to get a piece of Jake Paul. And so let's see, Roberto, you picked the over-under on strikes and near perfect strike total. Yeah, there you go. I mean, that's if you had the over, you did really well. But I love your point, Jeff. Max's cardio is for days. He never runs out of gas. Brian Ortega felt it, and Ortega was overwhelmed by that. And if you think back, you mentioned the Poirier fight. Max was coming back strong in that fight. He was about to outlast Poirier. If that fight had been any longer, the tide was really turning in Max's direction after Poirier hit him with a few big shots early. He did not get outboxed by all that much, and that fight was a very close decision too.
Yes, and I agree with the comment that all these MMA fighters think that they're better boxers than they actually are, but we never get to compare, right? We don't ever get to see them in there with a boxer, very rarely. And Conor was one of the ones that did it. But yeah, you hear the commentators throw that around. Oh, he's an elite striker. He's an elite striker. I don't know, man. They're not K1. They're not, winning the world max and everything. Overeem, I guess, did, but it's I don't know. It's hard to compare. It's hard to compare with people who specialize only in using their hands and then another sport where they only are specializing in striking, where MMA is not that way. Max is definitely one of the best boxers in MMA. I don't think anybody can dispute that, although I do think that point is a valid point, that we get caught up in these MMA guys. Oh, he's a great boxer. He's a great boxer. They're not boxers. They're mixed martial artists.
No, and as I look at MMA fighters who are really good boxers, Stipe comes to mind. Brandon Moreno comes to mind. For sure, Wonder Boy is a great striker, hands and feet, kickboxer. I mean, there are a lot of them. Adesanya's a kickboxing champion. Glover's a great boxer. I mean, you could just go through the list. Poirier, Conor McGregor, they're both great boxers. I know that they're, and Valentina's a Muay Thai specialist, but she's a great striker, as well as
Joanna.
Weili Zhang. Yep. And so there are a lot of them. I mean, but in terms of pure boxing, it's hard to imagine anybody being better than Max Holloway, any MMA fighter being better than Max Holloway.
Yeah, I mean, you just don't see people dig to the body like that. I mean, you can tell the guys that, I mean, he's definitely a higher level boxer than most of the people that he faces. And I'll agree, Calvin is not an elite level striker, but he did have a reach advantage, and he has an extremely good jab, and that takes you a long way, except it didn't take you very far against Max. And Calvin landed that jab repeatedly. He just couldn't set up combinations because Max met him with volume back.
I got one for you, Jeff, that's right there with him. What about No Love? Cody. Cody's a great boxer. That's his background. That's what he came from, an elite boxer.
Yeah, I mean, Cody's got really fast hands and throws straight punches. He just puts himself in bad positions in MMA fights. He'll overcommit and do some things. Yeah. I think his skill set is phenomenal when it comes to his boxing. I just question sometimes he overcommits. I mean, that's basically what happens. He fights on emotion, he overcommits and leaves himself open, and that's why you see Dillashaw clip him and other guys catch him. You don't see people clip Max that often. You get him with one, but you don't get him with a combination or a flurry very often. You're going to get that one shot on Max, and he's either going to fire back 3 or 4 back at you, or he's going to retreat. But yeah, No Love's a good boxer, man. I mean, you go back to like Chris Lytle. He was a boxer that came into MMA and had success. I'm saying that they're bad boxers. I just don't think that they're elite Floyd Mayweather style boxers. I don't think that those exist in MMA.
You like Francis as a boxer, Ngannou?
No, I think a boxer his size is just going to go to his body and have the same amount of power. I think he struggles with guys his size. And he throws wild punches, and in boxing, that's just going to kill you. You got to close up those holes in boxing, particularly. And I don't think Francis does that. Francis is a ridiculous athlete who has tons of power, but I feel like the holes in his striking game would get exploited by a technical, like Lennox Lewis would kill Francis Ngannou in their prime, in my opinion.
So now, in your opinion, yeah. Now we have, but Max, you think could actually really compete at a high level in boxing? Is how you're grading this out. Like, you actually think he could?
Yeah, I think he could compete. Now, I don't know if he can win a world championship, but he can be competing with those guys. Where I feel like most strikers in MMA are middle of the road boxers, right? They're not bad boxers. They're just not elite boxers. And I feel like Max could kind of at least make a competitive fight against those elite boxers. I'm not saying that he'll win. Not without completely abandoning MMA and focusing solely on boxing for like 2 years. You just can't do that. You can't. I can't all of a sudden pick up tennis, and start competing against the top people in the world. It takes some time. So so let's keep that in mind, that Max is a mixed martial artist training for a mixed martial arts fight, and for his boxing to be as good as it is doing that, considering his profession, it's pretty amazing. Where if he just solely focused on boxing, come on, man. I think that we all have to agree that he could compete against some pretty high-level boxers.
Yeah, and our buddy Roberto Lopez has another good point. He said Max doesn't have finishing power, and
no, he does not.
That's something that is crucial. He's gonna outpoint you, he's gonna outbox you, but to be considered the best boxer in the UFC, should he have that finishing power of a Cody Garbrandt at his weight class? It's hard to finish the lighter fighters. Let's be honest. Well, it's easy to turn somebody's lights out at heavyweight because you're 250 pounds. But if you're 135, 145, it's hard to finish because those guys don't have. That's why the Garbrandts of the world are so amazing, because they do have that lights out power at a lower weight.
Yeah, it's just a different skill, right? I mean, Floyd doesn't have knockout power.
No.
Evander Holyfield for most of his career didn't have knockout power,
Nope.
And so it's not about knocking out people. It's about beating them at boxing. And that's what Max does. I mean, it's sort of reminiscent of Floyd, right? He doesn't put everything into a punch. It's just like 60%, it's volume striking. And then once he gets you off balance or out of position, he throws the heaters, right? And so that's part of what I'm talking about with Max. He has a boxer's mentality. It's point until an opening happens, and then you exploit it. Point, opening happens, exploit it. That's sort of the way Max approaches MMA, and you don't see that, where Cody Garbrandt tries to force a knockout, tries to force an opening instead of waiting for an opening to appear. And so there's a different, and I'm not knocking No Love, man. Trust me, that dude is ridiculous. I'm just saying that there's a different mentality in the way that they approach a fight. Max is going to wear you down, right? That's his approach.
Max
I'm going to wear you down and I'm going to beat you up. Yeah. Where Cody's like, I'm going to get you out of here in the first exchange. It's just a different type of mentality.
This is Max against Ortega right there that we're seeing from our production team. And I mean, that was another clinic of a performance. And I would say that Max does have a lot of power. The guys who he's hitting, Volkanovski and T-City and Kattar, these are tough dudes with granite chins. I mean, he's just not these are some of the toughest dudes you'll ever see. Brian Ortega impressed me so much. And Max Holloway, he throws hard. He's not throwing soft punches in there. He's throwing hard. And he outboxed a guy who literally threw a lot harder than he did. So you mentioned it, Jeff. You're right. He's throwing volume. He's worrying more about connectivity and doing damage to different parts of the body than just winding up and throwing that one big shot. The thing that impressed me the most about Max in the fight, the combination that I loved the most, was when he threw the straight right and followed it, changing levels down with the right and coming up with the hook right under the rib cage of Kattar. And he did it so many times. I don't know how Kattar withstood that, because that shot, that left coming right up into the rib cage, following a straight right, he landed that thing almost every single time he threw that combo, and he buried it right into his body. I mean, these are not soft shots.
No, not at all. And anybody, a lot of people watch the sport and have never taken a body shot. Like I said, I would much rather you hit me in the face or in the jaw than you hit me in the body any day of the week, right? It's just, it's Calvin, man, is so tough because those were hurting. Those were hurting, and he just didn't show it. And that is impressive in and of itself. But yeah, Max has all these combinations that he throws. Like I said, he uses the double jab extremely well, because he puts the first one on you and he gets you to go back, and then that second one is just setting up the third punch to where he'll either throw a hook or go to the body. But he throws in volume. He throws combinations. He's not just throwing one punch out there. So each punch that he's throwing is setting up another. It's a different type of fighter. It's difficult to watch. It's difficult to kind of decipher what the hell Max is doing. But he's putting that jab out there to set up that right hand. He's putting up that right, like you brought up, to throw that uppercut sort of thing to the body that he throws, that hook, that up hook. I don't even know what you call it, man. But it lands effectively. Yeah, Max is an incredible striker, man, and hopefully people can appreciate that. I mean, yes, I like a knockout as much as anybody, right? I loved Mike Tyson, but you also have to kind of appreciate what like Sugar Ray Leonard was able to do, right? And what Floyd Mayweather is able to do.
It's called a sweet science, right? I mean, it literally is a science of boxing, and it's angles, and it's different. It's both hands. It's different angles and levels and speed and connectivity, and all these things factor in. It's footwork. It's everything. And Max Holloway's got it all. I mean, you just watch. He's a virtuoso in that octagon yesterday, and I definitely think that and I hope Poirier stands with Conor. I wouldn't if I were him. I'd try to take him down and choke him out, because Poirier's jiu-jitsu is legit. Although Conor's not terrible on the ground, but I want to see these guys stand up and strike. Everyone loves to see the fight where guys are just going back and forth throwing bombs at each other throughout the whole thing. But again, man, and we see it from Nate Diaz, the way Nate Diaz boxes and the way he changes speeds and changes levels and angles. And throughout the course of a fight, you see these guys get better and better and better and look for openings and angles. We saw it with Moreno against Figueiredo as the fight went on. Mm-hmm. He found more angles. He's got that devastating left hook where he almost won the fight with his boxing skills. So more and more, you see this elite level boxing. And for so long in the UFC, Jeff, you know this, you've been there forever too. It was wrestlers. I remember at one point in time where almost every single champ was a wrestler. And now the
Yep.
striking has become such high. Look at Adesanya. I mean, you're not seeing wrestlers dominate the championship belts anymore.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, Chuck Liddell kind of ended the wrestler's reign, in my opinion, around that era that they started, and then George St. Pierre's, came in and he became a wrestler. People forget that George St. Pierre came in as a karate guy and a striker, and then he changed to a wrestler. Well, which is phenomenal because you just can't do what he did, which is what makes GSP so great. But yeah, I think for a long time, for the beginning of the UFC, in my opinion, until those UFC 37, UFC 40 era, the wrestlers won. Tito Ortiz was a wrestler. Yeah, it wasn't until the Chuck Liddells and Vitor Belforts of the world came along, and the wrestlers started losing because they started using anti-wrestling tactics. Right? If you can't take me down, then we aren't going to wrestle.
Machida became when Machida came in. That was
and Anderson. I mean, it all kind of happened at the same time. We saw this big switch, but we're seeing it come back now. I think we're seeing some of these guys utilize their ground game more and more. You have to, right? When you're facing somebody like a Holloway or a No Love with that power, or an Ngannou, you have no choice but to work. The smartest path to victory is to take a guy down, even if you're not that good at wrestling, right?
No, that's Poirier's biggest advantage and best path to victory this coming week against Conor McGregor. What's up, Hasagna? Appreciate you. And hey, hello, Hugo Solario. We appreciate you guys watching and participating in the chat. Let us know what you think, man. Who do you think should get that next title shot? Everyone knows it's T-City, Brian Ortega. He's going to do it, and he's going to fight. I mean, they both make it to the fight, but he's going to fight Volkanovski next for the title. He was the #1 contender for Max. Max literally beat him half to death in there, just like he did Kattar yesterday. For some reason, Volko's been a tougher matchup for Max. I mean, obviously, Volko was a 200-plus pound rugby player, so he's going to be able to absorb a lot more of Max's strikes and take them even better than Kattar and T-City did. T-City, I mean, he was not going to stop until that fight ended. But when you look at what's next for Max Holloway, Dana said it yesterday, there's no denying he deserves the title shot. Ortega's going to get it now. Best case scenario for everyone involved is probably Ortega, except for Volko, is Ortega beating Volko, and then Max facing Ortega again. He beats Ortega, and then you see Max Volko 3, because it's going to be a while before Volko's going to want to give him another shot. One, because, and you look at the stare down there, Max has the size advantage, and I thought in the second fight between the two of them, Max was just as good as he was yesterday, boxing-wise, but Volko was able to turn the tides in that fight and show what a great fighter and a great champion he is out of City Kickboxing.
Yeah, I mean, but that's the fight that's going to happen. Volko says he wants a different fight. Max actually talked about this at the post-fight press conference. He's like, he points out that he says he wants a different fight. He's not saying he wants a tougher fight. I mean, the toughest guy in the division outside of the champions, Max Holloway, period. And so, yeah, he holds two wins over Max. But at some point, you can't have Max unleashed on the division, right? Or he clears out all the contenders and nobody gets to face Alexander. And so you got to kind of have Max fight T-City or have that trilogy fight in order to keep the division intact, or you're just going to have Max clear the division out and make a mockery of it to where, yeah, can I get a title fight now? But Max pointed this out in the post-fight press conference too. He had to go on a 10-fight win streak, win an interim title before he got a title shot the first time, and so I feel like Max feels like he deserves it, right? He was the champion. He went on the long winning streak. He held the belt for a long time. He lost the fight, and then he lost a razor close split decision. And then he goes out there and takes out the number 6 ranked Calvin, like he shouldn't even have been in the top 10. The drop off between Max and number 6 was so far that it's staggering. And so you can't just let him beat up number 5 and 4 and 3, and then you're never going to have a #1 contender. You got to settle that trilogy match. And if it ends up being 4 and 5 fights, I'm all for it, man. Those fights were entertaining. It's not like people, I mean, I don't understand that mentality, really. I don't want to see Max and him fight for a third time. Why? Because the first 2 weren't good? I mean, why not? I want to see the best fighters in the world fight. Yeah, I want to see the best fighters in the world fight. Those are the 2 best 145-pound fighters in the world.
I'd watch those guys fight every week, Jeff. You make a great point. I would watch those 2 fight every week if I could. Yeah.
I mean, I don't, it's just weird that we put so much on a loss, and it can have to do with just the night, right? You can beat a guy 9 out of 10 times, but then the one time in front of millions of people and the lights are on, you lose that fight. MMA is different than all other sports. So what? He lost. It was a razor close split decision, and some people, including myself, felt like he won that fight. So why not do it a third time? It doesn't. I don't understand that mentality on that. Let's the Patriots can't be in the Super Bowl 5 times in a row or something. The Yankees can't win a World Series because they've done it before. That's just a. I feel like we're selling ourselves short. I want to see the 2 best 145-pound fighters fight. And if it happens to be those 2 and they have to fight 12 different times because everybody else in the division can't rise to their level, then that's what we get.
Did we get tired of watching Brady against Manning? I didn't. I don't know about you guys.
Nope.
I didn't get tired of watching Brady against Manning or Red Sox, Yankees, late 90s, early 2000s. I didn't get sick of watching those things. And I love it. I didn't get sick of watching Jordan and the Bulls try to get past the Pistons for all those years, and they finally did. I didn't get sick of any of that stuff. The only thing I got sick of watching Jordan do was not play every game and retire. I was like, stop retiring, man. You're robbing us of the greatest basketball we've ever seen. And don't tell me LeBron is. I'm going to slap some people, Jeff. I'm going to start throwing some body shots. Anybody who thinks LeBron is better than Michael Jordan, this is not a basketball show, but you can't even have a conversation.
I could sum up that debate. Man. I always tell my friends, because I've got hardcore Kobe fans and LeBron fans, and man, I'm a Jordan. That's our era. I always tell them, man, the game's on the line, right? It's game 7. You're down 2 points. You got LeBron to the left. You got Jordan to the right. You got Kobe over there in the corner. Who you passing the ball to? Every time it goes to Michael Jordan. Every single time. No one's going to hesitate. They're not giving it to Kobe. They're not giving it to LeBron. Michael Jordan gets that ball every single time. The argument is over. People can move on. And if you're not passing Jordan the ball, then you're not really wanting to win that game.
No. And for all you young guys out there who, the international game rules and the Warriors and Curry and all that stuff, for those of you who are young and don't remember those days, there used to be a thing in basketball called defense. I know you guys don't know what that is, but there used to be a thing called defense, and it used to be violent. And Jordan got his ass kicked by the Pistons. There were games, and when you saw The Last Dance, it reaffirmed it for me. Jordan would score 53 of the Bulls' 81 points. I mean, think about that. Like, they have 81 points in the game, and MJ had 53 of them. But it looked like an MMA fight. Jordan had to lift weights because of the beatings. If you watch the Lakers and Celtics in the 80s and the contact and the way that guys used to get killed when they would come into the lane, I actually think LeBron would have thrived in that environment. But it did look like MMA. And Jeff, as we talk about the title picture, and we still have a little about 30 minutes left in the show, and we appreciate you guys in the chat, and we'll get to some of those in a minute. But as I look at the division, right, and Roberto had a good point in the chat. He's like, our Max's fights with Volko was either one memorable. I'd say the second one was really good. I don't know how memorable it was, but it was a really good fight, back and forth. Volko with that champion's mentality, but not really memorable, right?
Yeah, no, that's a very valid point by Roberto. That's a very valid point. No, nothing stood out like spectacular and make you, and that fight doesn't stand out in like as a historic fight. It doesn't. It was an excellent fight. But you still, Max is the number 1 contender in that division. The reason why we have rankings, the reason why you fight is to get yourself into a title position. And who else deserves a title fight more than Max right now? I mean, he's a former champion.
Ortega like I said, doesn't.
No, Ortega doesn't.
And he Ortega was out a year and a half, after Max beat him.
Yeah, like I said, it's a testament to the division's not as deep as people think that it is, and Max showed that last night, right? I mean, if that's the number 6 ranked guy in the world, and that's what the number 2 guy does to him, then man, we don't really have a 6 ranked guy in the world. We have 3 guys in a division, and everybody else just kind of hoping that that those top 3 guys beat each other enough to where a title fight lands in the 4th or 5th place guy's lap. But they're not earning it.
Oh my God, Staunch Boydie, I love it. When you smoke as much weed as me, nothing is memorable. That's the best comment in the chat so far. I love that. Thank you, Staunch, for that. When you smoke as much weed as me, nothing. I know Snoop remembers everything. I always thought Snoop was smoking fake weed. I have no confirmation on this, but no one could smoke that much weed and still be functional. The only guy, Jeff, who I want to throw out there is Zabit. We don't know, but Zabit looks to be that dominant type of fighter. Now he's the last guy to beat Kattar, and Kattar didn't look good against him either.
No, he's the wild card. Yeah, and I agree with you. So thanks for bringing him up because he's the fourth in that division. If you put T City in there, the loss to Holloway was so bad for Ortega that I don't even put him in there. I think it's a 2-man division.
Well, he
But then you
dominated
bring
Zombie in Zombies 5, so
yeah, yeah.
you're right.
But that's
There's
what I'm
nobody left.
saying. That's what I'm saying is the drop off to T City from Holloway is huge. It's huge. But then you bring up the third guy in the division that's the wild card that we don't know yet, but he looks phenomenal. And because the division isn't as deep as it some people might think that it is, he's probably going to get a shot at one of those people. But do you have Max fight him and ruin Max or Max ruin him? No. No, you don't. You let that guy work his way up there, and then once the Max and Alexander trilogy plays out, you got him waiting in the wings. That's what matchmakers do. But I agree with you. He's the wild card. He's the fourth name that can change that whole division, the landscape of the whole division.
He has to fight first, though. And that's the
Yes.
thing. He hasn't fought in a long time, and he's not title ready right now, I don't think either. At least he doesn't deserve the shot. But it's got to be Max against the winner of Volko and T-City. There's literally no one else unless, and my buddy's going to kill me if I don't bring this up, and my guy, man, I've known him forever, the Cringe Mafia is going to kill me if I don't mention the possibility of Triple C Henry Cejudo. If ever there's a division with nobody at the top where a guy like Henry could walk in and try to win a third belt, right now it is 45. So I know Henry can fight at 45. I know he walks around heavier than that. The guys at Neuroforce 1 will have him ready to run through walls at 145, and he'll need to against Volkanovski. But I've learned one thing about Henry Cejudo. Never count him out. And I've learned one thing about Dana White. There's no fight he won't make if it makes him money.
No. I mean, we have to kind of put who deserves a title fight on the back burner, right? I mean, because the UFC job is to put the fight together that sells tickets and gets viewers, and so you'll see Nick Diaz come off of a loss and a suspension and get a title fight. You'll see some of these guys get title fights that we don't think deserves them, but man, they sell tickets, and usually the fight ends up being okay. But yeah, Cejudo is an interesting case, man, because I don't know how to read him. Sometimes I think that he's just, negotiating and he's going to come back for a big payday and a super fight. And then other times I think to myself, there's really not anything for him to prove in combat sports, period. And so for him to stay away, I could totally get that. But then again, I feel like he's in his prime. He literally walked
32.
away in his prime. And so, he's also a wild card. I don't know. Like I said, you know him better than I do. I just have a hard time reading Henry. He's got a weird sense of humor, and then he says things that I don't know how to take them. So I don't know. That's
all by design, by the way. That's all manufactured by design. Henry's actually a brilliant dude. I've known him for a long time. He's very humble, came into the game very soft-spoken, but he realized he had to do something to make money. Look, Mighty Mouse was the perfect blueprint for being a great, great champion who didn't move the needle, and Dana used to make fun of him. And I mean, look, part of the game is selling pay-per-views. Part of the game is bringing in money. Part of the game is getting attention for yourself. And while Demetrius Johnson's an all-time great champion, the guy couldn't draw ants to a picnic. Let's be real. It is what it is. And when Henry fought him for the second time, it's a co-main event, right? It wasn't even a main event. So that was the level where he realized, okay, I just won a title fight against one of the greatest champions of all time, and it was a co-main event. Think about that for 1 second. And it wasn't a co-main event on a card where the main event was earth-shattering. It was TJ and Cody too. And it was a good main event, but not a great one. And certainly being a co-main against a legendary champ, Henry realized, okay, I got to go up a different division. TJ comes down, then he dominates Dillashaw. Marlon Moraes, another guy who doesn't draw. Henry fought him. And then Dominic Cruz, who does draw. Henry and Dominic Cruz, guess where that fight is? Co-main event to Gaethje and Ferguson. So when you look at what Cejudo's done, he wants to be that main event guy. He wants to be the guy who makes that money. The fight hasn't been there for him to do that. Jeff and Jan and Sterling and Sanhagen, none of those guys do anything for him. Maybe Figueiredo if he becomes a bigger star, but I think the only thing that makes sense for Henry Cejudo is to become the first 3-division champ. That's the story. Volko's not a big star either in terms of drawing power. So there just hasn't been that opportunity for Henry to get that big money fight.
Yeah, well, I mean, Henry wants to headline a pay-per-view. You know, I mean, because he could headline a fight night card, any one of them. He wants to headline a pay-per-view, which is going to be more difficult for him to do, in my opinion. That's where the money's made, right? I mean, you get the pay-per-view points and but yeah, man. I mean, I don't know. I would like to see Henry come back because I feel like he's in his prime, and those lighter divisions, some of them he could step right into, even with time off, you know, and not miss a beat and be in title fights. You know, Henry Cejudo doesn't need one fight to build himself up to a title fight in any of those divisions. If he comes back, he's going to get a title fight. It's just hard to sell. You know, the history of the sport, the big guys sell, right? Because we all get on the edge of our seat because we know somebody's getting knocked out when Francis and Ngannou or over him get in there. With Henry and them, it's more about skill set, and it's like what the person in the chat said. Did Alexander and Max, was it memorable? Well, yeah, it was an incredibly technical fight. But that's what you get when you put the two best fighters in the world in there. You know, I mean, knockouts happen on the big level just because people get clipped, or they happen because they're mismatched. You know, and so sometimes when you get the number 1 and 2 guy in the world, you're going to have a fight that doesn't stand out in your mind. But when you go back and watch it, you're going to be able to appreciate the skill and the chess match that took place. Henry's a wild card, man. I don't know. Like I said, it's hard for me to read. So, like, I would love to see Henry come back. I don't know why he retired. You know, I really don't know why he retired. But he knows why he retired. But he keeps talking. You know, he keeps talking. He keeps responding to people on Twitter. He keeps throwing digs at Dana and all these champions. Yeah, he's keeping his name out there, and so that tells me that he's willing to come back. He just wants the right fight or the right payday.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. He's been training his whole adult life. He's an Olympic gold medalist at 20 years old, underdog his whole career, never bet against the guy, but his body has that toll taken on it from years and years of training. The sparring hasn't been too bad with Henry. He's okay there. He has all his faculties. He makes great money. He's doing real estate investing. His mentor out here in Arizona, a guy by the name of Dave Zoine, who owns Fight Ready MMA and Fitness, is a multi-gazillionaire who's showing Henry the ropes in the business world. And, you know, he's got a lot of other things going on. He's actually a really cool, really soft-spoken, nice guy. The whole cringe thing is just bananas, and it's really taken off. I don't know if it will translate to sales and money or not for Henry. We'll have to see on a card that he headlines. But I think Volkov's the only fight that makes sense for him. And if Volkanovski beats T-City, I would not be surprised to hear Volkanovski say, you know what? I don't want to fight Max again right now. And then Triple C pipes in, hey, Uncle Dana, let's go. Let's do this. I want to be a 3-division champ. And then you have Volko Triple C. I would love to see that. The people in the chat would love to see it. People are wondering if he's ducking Petr Yan. No, Henry Cejudo's not ducking anybody. He makes no money against Petr Yan. And who did Yan beat to win the title? A washed-up Aldo who never deserved the shot. And I hate to desecrate Jose Aldo like that because he's a legend and one of the greatest fighters who ever lived. But Henry's not ducking anybody. He's not going to go in there against these killers for chump change. That's what it comes down to. The money is the driving force in this sport now. It wasn't for the longest time. It is now because fighters realize how much they can make. Look, Jeff, you made the point about lighter fighters, right? And people in the chat are saying that Mighty Mouse had marketability to a bunch of stoner gamers that are 23 years old, maybe. And I love Mighty Mouse. Look, he pointed me out in front of the whole scrum and said, you guys should all learn from that guy. I love him forever for that because they asked 8 questions before anybody even asked him about Cejudo in the fight where Henry beat him. 8 questions. Think about that, Jeff. As I'm waiting my turn, I just literally blurted out the F-bomb in the middle of the scrum. And people are like, well, what's wrong with? And Mighty Mouse goes, what's up with you? You got some? And I'm like, dude, no one's asking you about the Olympic gold medalist who's coming at you in a rematch to take your belt. We're 8 questions deep in this ridiculous thing we're calling media. So I'm literally sitting there just like salivating to ask him about Henry because I knew how Henry had trained. I was there for his camp and I had seen what he had done. But when I'm sitting there and I'm looking at what Henry has accomplished in the combat sports world, it hasn't been commensurate when you're talking about his pay, Jeff. It just hasn't. Whereas a McGregor can come in, a Rousey can come in, and Rousey's an Olympian too. So, but a McGregor can come in, or BJ Penn, who was the first smaller fighter to really make bank. Those guys could come in and do huge numbers that Henry hasn't been able to do. So I really would like to see him fight Volko, although I don't know if that's a main event on a pay-per-view. What do you think? I mean, it would have to be, but I don't know where that would stand in terms of marketability and bankability to be a main event.
It'll be a co-main. It'd be a co-main on a pay-per-view.
It'd have to be
You
a co,
know,
right?
yeah. I mean, you can't make the public accept you or like you, right? I mean, that's what it comes down to, or be interested in you. And yeah, you have these weird moments where a Ronda Rousey or a McGregor comes along, right? Or an Anderson Silva. But Anderson wasn't a star for the longest time. You know, with as much as he was killing people, he wasn't really a star for the longest time until that front kick of Vitor, you know, and then he became an international icon. Um, so I don't know, you know, Henry, I don't know if he's ever going to make the money that he wants to in fighting in mixed martial arts, just because of the weight classes and everything. And the marketability, it's just so hit and miss, right? It's just so hit and miss on whether or not McGregor works, right? The McGregor model works for Conor, but does that work for someone else? And the reason why it works for Conor is because it comes off as authentic, right? That's who Conor is. And so maybe part of Henry's selling problem is he needs to be Henry, you know, and not Triple C. He needs to be Henry, the world champion, the Olympic wrestler, the guy that nobody can touch, and things like that, instead of the King's crown and the props and everything. I don't know, man. I'm a big Henry Cejudo fan because, my God, dude, I mean, he's the greatest combat sports athlete in the history of combat
And why
sports.
wasn't
And
he
I don't
pushed
say that
more
lightly.
as an American hero? Why wasn't he pushed more as an American hero, an Olympic gold medalist? There's nobody else, just him.
Uh, I
Yoel
mean,
was
they
a
pushed
silver
him a little
medalist,
bit.
you know.
Yeah, they pushed him a little bit on that. And they definitely pushed Ronda on her Olympic medal. I mean, they
Bronze
100%.
medalist.
Yeah.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe at the time, Henry, you know, because Henry suffered some losses early, right? Where Ronda didn't. And so you get to exploit that more. It was kind of weird. Henry, at first, he needed to catch up. He needed a couple fights to get caught up in the
They
MMA. And
rushed
now he's,
him. They rushed him into
yeah,
the Mighty Mouse title shot first fight. They rushed him because the division was so thin. They rushed him.
yeah.
But the loss to Benavidez wasn't a loss. The point deduction and that fight was a joke. It was not. I never saw that as a loss. Henry did struggle early against Marlon. Ben Lloyd makes a good point. Marlon was literally, and Henry was on 1 foot for that fight. He trashed his ankle 3 days before, and then he tore his shoulder in the fight and still won and beat Marlon at his own game. So that's the thing. Like, the beginning of a fight, guys, is not the fight. You know, just because he
No.
got dominated early on, that's what a champion does. Jeff, you said it yesterday. It's mental. A champion
Yeah.
is able to overcome getting blasted early on in a fight and coming back and winning a fight. We've seen it so many times where guys are just getting their asses kicked and they come back and win the fight. That, to me, is what makes a champion, regardless of whether you have the belt or not. Henry's a champion. Frankie Saenz, who's one of my best buddies out here, is a UFC fighter. I've known Frankie 12 years. I called one of his fights on Coalition of Combat years ago. We just became buddies. Well, he has known Henry since he was a little kid. His father was Henry's first wrestling coach, and he's had a lot of them. But he said one thing about Henry is you'd see him in the wrestling room as an 8-year-old kid. You wouldn't think anything of him, and then he'd go win the damn tournament. He'd find a way to get it done when the lights were on. When it matters, he's at his best. And you see a lot of fighters like that. You watch them train in the gym day in and day out, and you don't think you're seeing anything super special, but then you see him in the octagon, and it's a whole different story. They just figure out a way to win. That, to me, is Henry. He was a huge underdog in the Olympics. Everyone was favored above him in the Olympic wrestling tournament. And he came out of nowhere and wins the gold. That's pretty much who he is as a person.
Yeah, I mean, the ability to adjust in a fight is huge, right? I mean, like Anderson Silva, go back to him. He took the first round off in most of his fights. He's just feeling. I just want to see what you have to offer. We get the speed and the distance, you know. And some adjustments seem obvious, right? If you're getting killed with right hands, maybe rotate the other way, you know. But Henry makes big adjustments, right? He made, and he's done that in several fights, to where he makes an adjustment and then and ends up dominating. You know, and that's all it takes, right? It's just that one little adjustment, you know, a change in footwork or the change in the way you exit the pocket can prevent you from getting hit. And so Henry is a master of making the adjustment. I give him that. He if he doesn't dominate a fight, there's fighters that have to be winning, right? And as soon as they face that first ounce of adversity, they cave. And when we've seen that fighter over and over, Mike Tyson could even be considered that fighter, right? But then there are other fighters who they can get the crap beat out of them for 11 rounds, man, and go into the 12th round and just beat the living crap out of you because they made the adjustment. Henry's one of those people. Not only is he incredibly gifted with his wrestling and his athletic ability, he's an intelligent fighter. He doesn't usually take a ton of damage either. So he's got longevity in his career, which gets us back to what Max was saying to the young fighters. He had that message: stop sparring and taking damage. And Henry seems to take that to heart, though. The noodle is the most important weapon in any sport.
Yeah, and people in the chat are going crazy about race and little guys versus big guys not selling. I mean, you're talking about the biggest and the best heavyweight of all time is not the biggest draw. When you talk about Stipe, I mean, then someone just put it in the chat. Donaje Vanderpool Bryant, good point. I'm sure Dana is praying Ngannou beats Stipe so he can fight John in a pay-per-view this summer, because Jones Ngannou has more sizzle to it than Jones Stipe. Even though you're talking greatest heavyweight, greatest light heavyweight, I still think Francis's knockout power and his storyline is a bigger draw in the eyes of a lot of people. And you could argue that one till the cows come home, Jeff. But at the end of the day, it's not just about whether you're little or big. Usually you can follow things like, but Usman's not a draw, right? He's not much of a draw at all. Khabib was not a draw until Conor McGregor, and he became a huge draw. Max has never been a huge draw. Adesanya's not a huge draw. In the UFC right now, I mean, the very few fighters in throughout the course of the history of the company, very few fighters have been that huge draw. Brock Lesnar, Conor McGregor, Ronda Rousey, I mean, they come to mind, sure. But then you have Chuck and guys like that on that next level down. Silva was never the biggest draw. Even GSP wasn't the biggest draw for the longest time. It's very tough to become that dominant champion who makes that kind of cash and makes the world stop spinning, like Barry Bonds. Every time when he came to the plate in the early 2000s, you stopped what you were doing everywhere you were to watch him hit. When Ngannou fights, the whole world wants to watch because they want to see him take someone's head off, and they know there's a good chance he's going to do it anytime he steps in there.
It's the anticipation, right? I mean, that's why the bigger guys usually over all combat sports sell better. Because it's the anticipation, right? When Mike Tyson walks to the ring, you got butterflies in your stomach, right? You knew something bad's going to happen, or history's going to be made, and he's going to lose. And people feel the same way when Francis walks to the octagon. You know something bad is getting ready to happen, and it's the anticipation to where when the littler guys go in there, you might be thinking, "Man, this is going to be a hell of a fight." But to think that you're going to get a first round face plant, one punch, walk off knockout, probably not. But you can get that in almost every heavyweight fight or in every light heavyweight fight. Now, I'm not saying that those things don't happen in the lighter weight divisions, but they're far and fewer between. But I think that's why you see the smaller weight classes, except for the women, right? The women seem to, the weight class doesn't so much matter on sellability. But for the men, it does seem that way. We've seen I mean, I remember when the UFC cut the lightweight division. They cut it because they couldn't sell fights. And now look at it. So, it's hard to say. Henry's coming along at a weird time to where he participated in the first flyweight, the first run of it, right? And these are the first run of the lighter weight classes. So it might take a few years or maybe even a decade for them to get the foothold. It took the lightweight division that long.
It only took us 50 minutes to get our first RIP Joe Rogan in the chat. People just love to put stupid stuff. It's become a thing. But man, it's definitely, Dana does love to put guys in there that have a country behind them and promote them, and women too. When you can put Wei Li in China for a fight, or do Khabib's last fight in Russia, of course. I mean, that just makes,
or Amanda in Brazil.
All of Ireland, of course. That's a big thing. Brazil with Amanda and Silva. But Jeff, we did have a bunch of other fights on this card, and we only have about, I don't know, maybe 10, 15 minutes left in the show. So I wanted to get your thoughts on the rest of this fight card, and people are dying for us to talk about the Joaquin Buckley hype train. I don't know that Joaquin Buckley had a hype train. He had a great knockout against Impa Kasanganay, but I don't think he had a hype train. Kevin Holland probably ended that hype train in August before it even started. So I don't think anybody had a hype train, but Alessio Di Chirico put a stop to anything Buckley was doing yesterday. So I know that's one that really stood out to me, and we'll get to Condit in a minute. But this fight right here with Joaquin Buckley, the head kick as he was getting peppered with leg kicks, very impressive win by Alessio Di Chirico in this fight.
Yeah, I don't think he had a lot of hype train really around his future in the sport. He got a lot of attention because he had a spectacular knockout, and now the attention's gone the other way. Boom. Now he gets the attention. Oh, his leg I didn't realize that his leg got caught behind him like Crow Cop and Gonzaga. I hope his leg's okay. I hate whenever you see somebody's leg go limp like that and they get trapped underneath their body because that just says knee injury all over it, right? And you don't even know it. But yeah, man, he got a highlight reel knockout, a candidate for knockout of the year last year, and to start 2021, he is the victim of a of a highlight reel knockout. That's the nature of the sport. I don't think he had a hype train going. I think he had a lot of attention, and maybe people tuned in to see if he could pull something like that off again. But I don't feel like he had a hype train.
People want a lot of money on that fight. A lot of people want a lot of money on that fight. The gambling is a big part of it now, and the odds were huge on Buckley. And I mean, you had the Dusko fight, you had the Leech knockout. I mean, Li Jingliang, that was unbelievable against Santiago, and I feel for Santiago after all the time he was out following the staph infection. But we had 3 great finishes to start the main card, and then you had vintage Carlos Condit. Here's the Jeff, say his name again for me.
Ponzinibbio.
Ponzinibbio. I love it when you.
Yeah,
Yep,
he doesn't look the same. He, in my opinion, he doesn't. He was ranked 7th in the world before the staph infection in the sideline. That guy was on a good winning streak. He just doesn't look like he did a year ago, 2 years ago. He actually looks a little soft compared to what he looked like.
And Lee was on a nice run too. And remember, that was Magny's comeback fight. Magny beat Lee last year. So, but Lee's a really good fighter too. I mean, I thought this was going to be a very entertaining fight, and I think the Leech. I mean, look at that jab, just the head movement, and just drops him. That was really impressive. Speaking of boxing, right there, very impressive.
Yeah, it was very highlight reel knockout. Yeah, and that's a big fight to come back to. Lee's not an easy opponent to come back after a long layoff. And staph infections, man, they're hit and miss. I've seen. I remember Randleman sent me a picture of his staph infection. It looked like a softball-sized hole, right? And I was like, oh my god! And so staph infection can ruin people for years. It can take years to come back. And I feel like maybe that's what we're seeing here. Is he come back a little too early and got too high of a ranked opponent, and it showed. He's going to have to go back to the drawing board and start over, man. He's not the number 7th ranked guy in the world anymore, right? He needs to be taking on people that are ranked probably around 20 to build his career back up. I felt like felt unfortunate that happened, considering the health issues that he had and the long layoff. And then he gets a guy ranked in the top 10 and he gets, he got what he got.
Yeah, and here's the Soriano. I mean, that was an impressive performance by Soriano against Dusko too. And that was in round. All of them were in round number 1, but this fight was very entertaining to start the main card. You had all decisions on the prelims, including a really good heavyweight fight, Carlos Felipe and Justin Tafa. But then you have 3 consecutive first-round finishes to start the main card. We saw 2 of them already, and here's the one. This is actually the fight that kicked off the main card, and this was very entertaining back and forth in the 4 minutes and 48 seconds they were in there.
Yeah. Oh, the defense. This is just his hands are down, and he was getting out of the way by a couple of inches early in that fight, and then all of a sudden, he found his range and this fight could have been stopped earlier. I felt like. I mean, the guy got dropped like 4 times, and Herb's just kind of like, maybe I'll stop it now after he got dropped. I mean, whenever your legs cave like that and you just drop straight down.
Though. That's Herb. I mean, he wasn't stopping. I mean, people were wondering if he should have stopped Max and Kattar. He wasn't stopping that fight. Have you ever seen the meme of Herb Dean standing over the grave with the bones in the ground? Yeah. And he goes, hey, you're going to have to show me something or I'm going to stop this.
Yeah, I like Herb Dean. I think Herb, if I'm a fighter, I want Herb in there.
Me too.
Because I feel like
on your shield, man.
Yeah, but he protects fighters, right? He protects fighters. People forget that he was the referee when Tim Sylvia's got his arm snapped against Frank Mir. Nobody saw it except for Herb Dean, and he stops that fight and saved Tim Sylvia's career. Herb Dean is a very good referee, but he does let things go a little long. But I like that in the fight game, right? If I'm a fight, I want you to beat me. I want you to knock me out of this equation, or I'm going to be mad at a stoppage, right? If I'm not done, then don't stop it. That's sort of how. But then there are other fights, that I see where I'm like, dude, that thing should have been stopped, and that was one of them.
Kattar kept coming. In the fourth round, he did get wobbly. Looked out on his feet a couple times, but he recovered very quickly, and he still was throwing a lot of hard punches at Max. That should not have been stopped, in my opinion. And, Jeff, at some point, you put it on the corner if you're a ref. I mean, I know you have criteria you have to go by, but if the corner doesn't want the fight stopped and they see their fighter every day, they know their fighter better than anybody, and you're not going to see that. So if a corner stops a fight, right, then you know that their fighter was done and shot. So sometimes you put that responsibility on a corner, and you know the corner will throw in the towel, and you very rarely see that anyway. But most fighters want to go out on their shield. Most fighters want to be finished or go the distance, and you're just going to always have that. Then you get into the argument of saving a fighter from him or herself. But at the end of the day, there are definitely fights that need to be stopped. And like when Francis took Overeem's head off and then came down with the hammer fist. When Gaethje beat Cowboy and he was pissed that the fight wasn't stopped. Or Ferguson. Tony Ferguson took inhuman punishment in that fight.
See, that fight should have been stopped way before that. But I'll agree with this. Calvin wasn't displaying those signs of distress, right? He was covering up and he wasn't firing back as often, but he wasn't staggering. He wasn't, his gait, the way his footwork worked, wasn't off. He did not look. Tony Ferguson, man, that fight still gives me nightmares. That shit should have been stopped way before that, especially
Who was the ref on that one? Do you remember?
I do not remember, but
anybody remember who the ref was on Gaethje and Tony? It was in Jacksonville.
I don't remember who it was, but there are fights. I didn't feel like Calvin should have been stopped, but that fight, the fight that we were showing the highlights of, that guy got dropped like 4 times. And so I don't know, man. You have to, as a referee, you do have to protect the fighter, and if the corner's not going to, that's what you're in there for. But I don't feel like that comes into play very often. It did in the Tony Ferguson fight, and I felt like maybe that fight should have been stopped on the when he was dropped the 3rd time and not the 4th.
Yeah, I'm trying to see who the ref was there. Does it even say? Jacksonville Arena. It was UFC 249.
It probably won't say on like.
That was the same fight card as Henry and Cruz when Henry finished Dominic Cruz. Let me see. If anybody knows it, throw it in the chat for us if you don't mind. It was Herzog, wasn't it? It was Herzog. That's right. Yeah, I mean, and nothing against Herzog, but you're not Herb Dean or Mark Goddard, and certainly you miss Big John. Obviously, it was Herzog. Yeah. That's right. Okay, thanks for that in the chat. Who was that? That Roberto? No. Was it Herzog? Yeah, Roberto. Homeless in America. Thank you. Homeless in America. I love these names in the chat room. So, Jeff, it was a great fight card, top to bottom, very entertaining. The one fight we haven't, there it is right there, reading our mind. Carlos Condit, the natural-born killer, turning back the clock, at least in terms of the performance. Now, we know the skills have eroded a bit, the speed, the power. Matt Brown's 40 years old, Condit 36, but vintage Carlos Condit, some takedowns, a lot of volume, and every single thing thrown with violence from the natural-born killer and a lot of blood. Everything you'd expect from a Carlos Condit fight.
Yeah, and that reversal on the ground was amazing. Carlos looked good. This was a good veterans matchup. It was Carlos's last fight on his contract. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. Although Dana didn't sound like he was going to cut him, but you never know. Matt Brown, though, I think that might have been the last time we see him in the UFC. I don't have that on any official, any official sources on that. I'm just looking at his record and his age, and he fits the mode of the guys that are being cut. Carlos, though, might have breathed some life into his career right there. He had struggled of late. Now he's on back-to-back wins. I don't even know how long it's been. It's been years since he's put together back-to-back wins, but it was classic Carlos Condit.
But when you're beating guys like Matt Brown and Court McGee, who arguably shouldn't be in the UFC anymore either, I mean, I hate to say that because far be it from me, and I feel like a shit when I say things like that. But if you're being real about things, the guys like Lawler and Maia and Magny and Alex Oliveira, Chiesa, and those are the guys who beat Condit. I mean, Woodley, Hendricks, he's lost to the top level guys. Could he stick around and fight lower level guys and make money for a long time and make money for the company? As long as he's not paid too much, he probably would be around, right? No, I mean, Diego Sanchez, I know Dana loves Diego. This guy's finished. Just guys hanging around too long. Lieben did it. Dana came out and flat out said Anderson Silva's not fighting here again after the Uriah Hall fight, and there's no bigger legend in the sport than him. So, we say it all the time. Father Time is undefeated. No one wins that battle. against aging. And we've seen it so many times, and we've seen some of these awful fights that Bellator does when they bring back 50-year-old guys. We saw Golden Boy try to do it with Chuck and Tito, and I agree with Dana. Those are disgraceful, absolute disgrace to do those things and put those fights on. And I'm not saying the fighters are disgraceful because they want the money and they take the opportunity, but disgraceful on the part of a promoter to put 50-year-old guys in there and call it elite level mixed martial arts when you have those guys all over your roster. So I think that when I look at Condit, he's not in that category. I think he still looked pretty quick. I think he still looked pretty good in there. I don't think I'm one of those guys who thinks Condit should retire right now. I think he's earned the right to keep going, and as long as he looks decent in there against the quality of competition they're putting him in with, then I think you let him go.
Yeah,
and I don't mean let him go like drop him. I mean let him keep going.
Yeah, I mean it's hard to say. Carlos has a rich history with the UFC, coming from the WEC and over. Before before Zuffa bought the WEC, and then he's kind of had that transition, and then now through the new ownership. But the veteran fights. We just had huge interest in Tyson and Jones, and so maybe we present these as differently. Because they presented that as an exhibition, right? Yeah, Tito and Chuck. 3 or whatever that was terrible, right? Because Chuck
Awful.
looked so bad, and I can't believe that was ever sanctioned. But if that were like billed to us as an exhibition fight, then maybe I wouldn't have been so upset about it. It's just
Tyson
that you're
Jones,
sanctioned.
yeah, good point.
And so maybe they do these differently. I would love to see Carlos Condit and Robbie Lawler fight again. Neither one of those guys are getting anywhere near a championship fight.
Dude in the
they're
chat
not
right there, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, they're not relevant in their division, but they still have meaningful matchups out there. These legendary matchups that didn't get to happen younger in their career, which is why we saw Carlos and Brown last night.
But even like Shamrock and Hoyce, I mean, those, I just, come on. Bellator did that for a
there's certain
while.
fighters I don't want to see fight again. Like, do I want to see Sakuraba get knocked out again? No.
I don't want to see
Chael
again.
Shamrock? No, I do not want to see Chael again. I agree.
I
Carlos doesn't fall.
Again.
No, I do not want to see Vandalay. I don't want to see Rampage again. In fact, Rampage should be banned from the sport with the way he showed up in his last outing. My God, Rampage, get yourself together.
You and Rampage have a little history there.
Well, did you see weighed in at like 206? I mean, that was not Rampage, man. That was like
no, it wasn't.
I don't know what that was, man. I felt bad for him. I felt bad for him that he had to walk out there looking like that in a fight because I guess he didn't have enough time to prepare for it like he needed to. But I don't want to see that in the sport. Like Rampage should have never been in that fight. Liddell should have never been sanctioned to fight Tito the third time. Carlos does not fit into that category. He does not fit into that category. I'm not sure Anderson Silva fit into that category. I didn't feel like he looked that bad against Uriah Hall, but it's coming. And Anderson's one of those guys that relies on speed and athletics and athleticism to get out of the way of punches. Like his defense has never been all that great. And so
Dana too, like he never forgets. If you gave him any problems in the past, he never forgets, no matter who you are. It's probably a big part of the reason why you're not going to see why he shot the Schmo down last night when the Schmo started talking about GSP, like right away. Nope, no interest in that fight. Khabib GSP, nothing. Nope. And part of that has to be like he's not just going to let GSP come back and do a one-off again. And one of the reasons is he doesn't really like GSP. Let's be real.
Well, he had a hard time getting, he was one of those fighters that retired when Dana didn't think he was going to, and kind of messed up the division a little bit, messed up their plans. Well, let's just put it out there. GSP is doing what Khabib's doing now. He did what Khabib's doing now,
Good
yeah,
point.
I mean, Dana, while Dana absolutely never forgets, he'll also work with you. Like him and Tito Ortiz absolutely hated each other, but he brought him back. Yep. Him and Randy Couture him and Randy had the UFC and Randy had legal battle and court battles. Randy came back, so while Dana's a promoter, he'll work with you if you can make money, right? If you can make the business money, then we're going to work together. But these guys now, some of these guys are getting to the point where it's not worth the money that it's generating. Carlos, I don't feel like's in that category, but Matt Brown probably is. Matt Brown is. But I think that we're on the fence with Carlos because it was his last fight under contract. I don't know if they're going to bring him back. They're not going to sign him to a great contract, right? He's going to get a journeyman's contract. And and then when we'll see if he fights it out. I like Carlos Condit. I've seen Carlos fight forever, man, from the beginning. But
Love him.
But age catches up to you, man.
He showed enough to me against Matt Brown, and maybe I'm not giving him a 4-fight deal. I mean, it's fight by fight at this point for me.
Yes.
But I also think that he's not Guida or Diego Sanchez or
No.
just there's a lot of those guys still floundering around, and I hate to say it even like that. I always feel so disrespectful, but we're just giving our honest thoughts here, and far be it for us. I'm not going to sit here and desecrate a legend. I sat cage side and watched Diego Sanchez and Gilbert Melendez, one of the most entertaining and greatest mixed martial arts fights I've ever seen in my entire life, that night in Houston back in 2013. And, but again, it's 2013, 7 years ago. So,
well, I mean, my concern, I'm not being disrespectful when I say I don't want to see Diego Sanchez fight ever again. I'm saying that because I don't want to see Diego suffer any more damage. I don't want to see 65-year-old Diego drooling from his mouth, and not being able to not being able to remember his kids' birthdays and stuff, That's why I say that. That's why I don't want to see Ken Shamrock or Sakuraba or these people or Liddell back in there. There's people, it goes back to what Max said to bring this full circle. There are fighters that get in wars, and their longevity in the sport is not that long. Max
Spencer
is not
Fisher
one of those
in the
people.
News with what
Spencer Fisher is in the news
going on, and Pettis was talking about that and one of the guys I worked with in my career calling fights is Jamie Varner, old school champion, coming up in Arizona Combat Sports, where they just sparred and try to take each other's head off 24/7, and that adds up. The fighters who sparred all the time, constantly, you're going to see that. Like even in the NFL, quarterbacks playing into their 40s because they're not getting hit anymore. They're not getting the 400 concussions that Joe Montana had or Steve Young had or any of those guys had, because they were not Troy Aikman, for example. They're not getting hit like that. So the fighters who aren't sparring, Varner said, I wish I hadn't sparred as much, man, because those days of sparring, they take not only a toll on, they take years off your life, years off your career. Then you keep getting hit and hit and hit and hit and hit. And it's just, at what point is enough, man? And I just, I don't want to see Diego like that either. There are certain guys I wouldn't mind seeing him get punched a million more times, honestly. But I mean, that's just me. I mean, you don't want to see anyone get, it hurt like that. And, it's definitely when you spar, as much as people were sparring back in the day, you got a lot of head injuries. You got a lot of concussions that go undetected. You got a lot of things going on. And, just guys who boxed and also did MMA, and Varner's another one of those guys. He wrestled and he boxed. So I look at it and I just think about longevity is one thing. Fans seeing fighters they love watching. But when you're done, man. I don't want to watch Jordan and Barkley play one-on-one right now either,
Yeah, it's too dangerous, though. Jordan and Barkley aren't going to have head injuries and the long-term effects of playing one-on-one. The fight game is different. The fight game is different. Once you figure out that you don't belong in the fight game anymore, it's probably already too late. And so that's what it is for me. I don't feel like I'm being disrespectful to Matt Brown and Diego in saying that. It's just concern, man. I don't want to see the first winner of the Ultimate Fighter over here not being able to live comfortably in his later years and keep his mental faculties intact. And we know that that's the risk, right?
Then we know that that's the risk. And speaking of that risk, and speaking of when fighters should or shouldn't walk away, our last thing we're going to talk about here today as we move forward toward Chiesa and Magny on Wednesday. We'll be streaming live for that. We have Conor McGregor's top 5 funniest moments coming up. That show we're going to be doing for you. We have a preview show for McGregor and Poirier. We're going to be streaming live during McGregor and Poirier. We're going to be doing our roundtable post-fight show for that next Sunday as well. But the topic of conversation is perfect segue. Fighters walking out on top, athletes walking out on top. Khabib Nurmagomedov, to me, has to fight again. He has so much that he's leaving on the table that once you get older, you can never do that again. You have a small window as an athlete. He's in his 30s. He doesn't have that many fights. He doesn't have that many rounds. He doesn't have that much damage on his body. So he's at the peak of his performing capabilities right now. He's the best Khabib we've ever seen. He might be one of the best fighters we've ever seen. To walk away now, to me, I could never do it. I could never do it if I were him, and that's why I think we're going to see him again.
Well, Khabib's a different animal, right? Because Khabib grew up in Russia watching Fedor Emelianenko become a national hero, right? And then Fedor's legacy has been tarnished.
Hugely
Khabib's
tarnished.
legacy is not tarnished. He can walk away now and be President Putin in a decade. He has options, right? His legacy is intact. It just kind of
And he
depends
has
on
money.
what he wants to do. Yeah, and he has money, and he's
Money,
already
big
accomplished
money
everything.
makes you a lot smarter.
Yeah. And so I don't know with Khabib. Is he chasing the 30 or is Dana chasing the 30? And so that's what we're going to find out next week when Dana meets with Khabib in Las Vegas. I don't know that Khabib gives a damn if he wins 30-0. He doesn't care. He's an icon in his country. He is an
But the
icon. He could be
competitive juice
on.
is
He could
Jeff.
be. I'm
To
sorry.
walk away, the competitive spirit, man, to walk away when you're at the peak and there are guys out there who you could fight. Now, that's the other part of this. Who's out there that really entices him to want to fight? Like you said, if you beat someone's ass like McGregor and what McGregor did leading up to that fight, you wouldn't want to give him another shot either. You'd be like, kiss my ass, I'm never getting a rematch. And I understand that. He's already beaten Poirier. He's already beaten Gaethje. He hasn't fought Michael Chandler or Hooker, but are they big enough names to entice him? He wanted to fight Mayweather. There are so many things with this choice for Khabib. I think McGregor 2 is the fight to make. You think he'd rather fight Poirier, but there isn't that one fight where everyone's going. And now because of the occurrences of 2020, Tony Ferguson's no longer that guy in that mix and doesn't do it. So there really isn't that one fight to say, yeah, but he didn't fight this guy. Yeah, but he didn't fight that guy. He's pretty much cleaned out everyone who he needed to clean out in that division. And if he doesn't really want the 30, and he doesn't need the money, what else is there to entice him to come back and fight again other than feeling like, Jordan walking away the first time when you're at the peak of your powers, you're literally depriving the world of your greatness and yourself of your greatness that you can't take back that choice later in life.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, with both Khabib's a different animal, though. He's different than everybody else. Like when we're talking about any other fighter, I agree with everything you're saying. Khabib's different. I don't. I feel like his legacy's intact. He's got his undefeated record, and so when he comes back, the fight that I would like to see him is Oliveira because I think that's interesting once it hits the ground. I think all those other fights, as soon as the fight hits the ground, Khabib mauls them, fights over. With Charles Oliveira, all of a sudden that becomes interesting. And so if there's going to be a fight, that's the fight. But the problem with that is Oliveira is not a sellable name, but that doesn't matter to Khabib. That matters to the UFC. And so
Yeah.
I don't know how this is all going to play out. And I feel like Khabib is more, just his personality is more apt to give Poirier that other shot or Oliveira a shot rather than a Conor, right? He's kind of helping you out. He's kind of showing respect to you. And Conor knows it. And it also gets back at Conor, right? You don't deserve a shot. I've already killed you, chicken. I'm going to fight him over here because I think he's a tougher matchup. And that is the ultimate insult.
How do you entice him if you're Dana? I mean, Dana already, to get him to this point where he's open to fighting again, which was the non-announcement yesterday, to he's open. I mean, that in and of itself is a pretty big accomplishment from Dana. So the only thing really is that his father wanted him to hit that 30. That to me is the only reason Khabib does it, based on what you're saying. And you're right. He is a different animal. The only reason he does it is because his father wanted him to hit 30-0. And to me, that would be it.
Yeah.
Or to do it in Moscow. Headline an event in Moscow in front of 100,000 people. That'd be the other reason.
Yeah. See, I don't think Khabib's going to take an easy fight. Because that's where I would be. If I'm Khabib and I got one more fight left in me, then throw me some lightweight champion that had the title a decade ago, and I'm walking out with my 30. Exactly. That's how I'm going to do it, but that's not who Khabib is. And so he's going to want one of those guys, one of the top guys, except I think the one that matches up the best is the one being least talked about. Of course, the UFC wants Conor. Right? Everybody wants Conor. I'm not sure that Khabib wants Conor. Although, let Conor start running his mouth again. Because Khabib was so pissed off at Conor, like, send me location. Conor throws a dolly at the bus. These guys were like hate each other. So if Conor starts poking the bear a little bit and starts making more disrespectful comments that we know he's capable of, then maybe we do see Khabib come back and accept. He doesn't switch from an armbar to a triangle. He just breaks the damn thing.
Unbelievable. Yeah. I mean, I think that it would be, I don't know. I think it's a crime to leave when you're that great and you still have so much in you, because later in life, I think most guys, and I know Khabib's different and we don't know, but I think at some point later in life, you go, wow, I had more in me. I had more in me, and I didn't empty the gun. And that's something that, for me personally, even as the terrible athlete that I always was, I always felt like I should have played longer. I should have played even men's league basketball and baseball longer, because now that I'm 49 and today's my birthday and I can't really do it anymore, I left it on the table. So imagine being the best in the world, which I can't even fathom, the best in the world, and walking away. Jordan's the only example. He came back. Jordan's the one I think of when I think of someone walking away at the absolute peak of his powers and just saying, I'm done. He eventually came back. His father had died. It was a baseball thing. The fathers always have that influence, which is why, and Roberto Lopez in the chat says it too, his father wanted 30. I think that's what weighs on Khabib the most. His dad wanted, if it could be Conor McGregor in Moscow and he beats him again and chokes him out again in his home country with 100,000 people, with Putin sitting cage side, that makes Khabib, and he already is, but that makes him the most legendary Russian maybe ever in history at anything. I mean, and he's above Fedor to me now, but maybe that would have to be what it would take in Russia to put him above Fedor. Maybe he wants that. Who knows? Who knows? But I do know I want to see him get in there at least one more time. And I don't think we'll see him more than once. I just hope it is once.
Yeah, I don't think we'll see him more than once. If we see him the one time, we talk ourselves in circles, right? Because we want to see Khabib fight. And then so we convince ourselves, well, his dad wants 30, and Dana's kind of using that as psychological warfare to say, hey, your dad wanted 30. But what we also forget is that he promised his mom, who is alive, that he would never fight again. But we're choosing to ignore that. We're choosing to ignore that. I know. We're just, that's what I'm saying, is that we're convincing ourselves. And Khabib, you can't win psychological warfare against Khabib. Khabib's going to do it if he wants to. We're going to know next week. I don't know. I'm still on the fence, Jim. I don't know if Khabib's going to fight again or not. He doesn't show his hand. He never shows his hand. So I still don't know.
I wish he was going to be there. He doesn't buy into all the promo stuff either, the shit that Conor loves. And he said it's just business. Like, if he really cared about the winner of Conor versus Poirier, don't you think he'd be there for 250? Yeah. He's not even going to be there. He's leaving Wednesday, and he's not going to be there for McGregor and Poirier. What does that tell you? That's a very telling. And Dana has to go back to Vegas to meet him. So that's to me, that might be the most telling thing I've seen so far about whether Khabib's going to fight again. The fact that he doesn't even care enough to be there for the McGregor-Poirier 2 fight.
Well, it's a statement, right? Because, Dana wants him there, right? You want him cage side. You want his reaction to the way that fight ends. You want to put it on the pay-per-view. You want to zoom in on him and build it. Khabib killed the possibility of promoting anything. He's going home. So you can't use Khabib to promote. Yeah, you can't use Khabib to promote this stuff. And that kind of makes me lean that he's not going to fight. But I don't know, man. I mean, like I said, he's so hard to read. He's like Henry Cejudo to me. They're a different mentality, a different, maybe they've evolved further than I could even comprehend. I'm even willing to entertain that when it comes to people like that. Khabib is just what motivates most people don't motivate Khabib. But Khabib's motivation isn't really matched by any other human being on the planet, and that's why he's Khabib. I don't know, but him leaving and not being there is a statement. He could stay for 2 more days or 3 more days and been just fine, but he's choosing to come home on Wednesday to make a statement. Now, I don't know what that statement is, though.
Man, it'd be great if they just turned into WWE and his music hits on Saturday. And he just stomps out.
What the UFC,
Dennis walks by him. They brawl in the hall. Oh, man,
Conor wins, and then the eagle comes flying over the cage, right? Like he did after their fight out of the cage. He does this one inside.
He comes flying in this time, but Khabib doesn't care about any of that stuff, man.
No, he doesn't care about it.
I think Cat O is off on this in the chat. I appreciate the comment, but they literally don't want Khabib there to avoid a recreation of what happened. No, they want a recreation of what happened, minus how far it went. They want the drama. They want the tension. They loved it when Conor jumped over and got in Aldo's face. They love those things when they happen. And Conor, will do it because he's the master of it. But Jeff, I don't know.
Me? Look, listen to me. The UFC, Conor McGregor went to New York, threw a dolly at the fight bus, right? Yeah. He gets arrested for it. And the UFC used it in promos to build the fight.
Yeah.
Dana doesn't give 2 shits what happens about avoiding controversy. We love controversy. Now, if anything, what Dana didn't want is an altercation between Conor and Khabib in Abu Dhabi, where the entire crowd is going to beat the living shit out of Conor McGregor. Now that could be a possibility.
He might not make it out of there. He might not make it out of there. That's a good point.
Trust me, Dana loves the we can talk all we want about, oh, that was bad for the sport. That was bad for the sport. Yeah. Look at the views on the video and tell me what's bad for the sport. It's not bad for the sport. It's beautiful for the sport.
For this beautiful, man. Speaking of beautiful, Jeff, another great job by you on the show today. We have Wednesday coming up, Chiesa and Magny. It kind of like the calm before the storm, but it's nice to have the 3 fight cards in 1 week. I love Chiesa. Magny's comeback's a great story, and it's just going to keep our appetites wet for Saturday. McGregor and Poirier too, and then Chandler and Hooker. What a week of fights, man, on Fight Island. What an incredible time for us. We're going to be bringing you shows every single day, just about, here on MMA Weekly, on YouTube, on Facebook. Stay on our social media. Follow us. Stay on the website. Jeff is working like a dog all week, writing. Ken Pishna and the whole team there. The recaps are up from yesterday on our YouTube. The 2021 preview shows going up, and we are just literally day in, day out bringing you this content. And I feel like a kid in a candy store, man, this week in particular, with McGregor and Poirier coming up after Max's performance yesterday. The news with Khabib, we are full steam ahead into the 2020 fight year.
Oh, 2021's kicking off great, right? It's kicking off, and we got fans back. I mean, it's kicking off great. And I missed the fans. I didn't realize, at your 2021, I didn't realize how much I missed the fans until last night. Like the reactions, it's just amazing. Like everything, Max landed a combination, the crowd go crazy. When Condis got that reversal, the crowd went crazy. Man, I missed that, and we got the fans back. That's a beautiful thing.
Yeah, thank you, Max, for blessing us with that incredible performance yesterday. We can only hope that McGregor, Poirier, and Chandler Hooker live up to what Max laid down as an example yesterday. Going to be tough to do. Jeff, I love working with you, man. This is so much fun sharing this stage with you. Scott and the whole MMA Weekly team. Appreciate all you guys as well. All of you for watching, being in the chat. We love all of you. Don't forget, keep smashing that like button. Keep subscribing. Tell your friends about us. Keep bringing those YouTube numbers up for us. Hit the bell so you know when we have new content up. Throw those comments up there, even if you think we suck. We love it, and we have a lot of fun engaging with you, the great fans of the best sport on the planet. MMA Weekly is the most trusted name and trusted source of news and entertainment in mixed martial arts for almost 20 years. Again, we'll be all over these Fight Island fights. Just keep it right here. No reason to go anywhere else than MMA Weekly. For Jeff, for our whole crew, I'm Jim Greashauer. Call me Grease. I appreciate you letting me share some of my birthday with you, and I appreciate you letting me do and letting us do what we love every single day, covering the greatest sport in the world. Make it a great day, everybody. We'll see you soon.